and nutrition and exercise science is so old. And yet now, like Andrew Huberman's talking about it. Well, neuroscience shows that all the bodybuilders are like, duh. Hey, so I'm Kate McKay. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you. I'm deeply committed, in particular, to men's mental health for a variety of reasons, and I think that's my main reason why I'm living, is to have powerful conversations with people around claiming their warrior. And it's really stemming from my firm belief that we all have a story, and I think that we're here to share them. And my story is really based on my son, William. And Grace is actually the cover of my book, Claim Your Inner Warrior. He was a warrior, and unfortunately, I lost this boy in 2017. And so my why every single day when I wake up is I can be like, I could die today, but no, I'm here to serve. And that's why I'm honored to say yes to be here and play with all of you guys and answer questions and bring my own personal insight and share my story with all of you and your audience.
Well, we are greatly appreciative and blessed to have you here. And we're so thankful, and we mourn for your loss. I'm sorry to hear that. But that's why a lot of us have dedicated our lives to these causes. I've also felt, the sting of post-traumatic stress, and a lot of our audience has well. And for folks who haven't, they may lead organizations who have causes that will further the solutions that we have been discovering on our show. So we salute you, our hats off, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of it's such an interesting, a little bit of a backstory. I'm one of 9 children, so a lot of chaos in the big fam. And I'm number 6 of 9, 5 boys and 4 girls. And my brother Matt, he was wild and he was a trip. And so I was always like being his, covering for what he was doing, because usually it wasn't something probably he shouldn't have been doing. But the irony is that I lost my brother. My brother was murdered in 1987, and he was 22, and my mom was 54. And when Will passed away, Will was 22, and how old was my mom? Right? She was 54. So I do believe that there are things that come through us that we have to face, but also more importantly to heal, because these things come through generations. And I was always the positive one. I mean, as you can tell, I have a pretty positive energy, and yet trauma is part of my DNA. And yet I feel that I was given a bright light to be a change agent. And that's why I can smile through the tears and play in the mess and live in the mess of other people's stories, because I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid, because what's there to fear, right? It's like I've already lost. And so now everything else is just, as you said, it's the self-licking ice cream cone, which I still have that image in my head, Ken. I just can't shake it. Can you explain that more, actually?
Sure. Yeah. So what she's referring to is what we were entertaining each other before the show started. And I said the esports industry represents or resembles a self-licking ice cream cone. So it's an ice cream cone that exists only for its own pleasure. So many organizations and many systems and sometimes people exist for their own existence. So the reason for their existence is their existence. So certainly, yeah.
It's a powerful image, it really, really is, because it's like the pleasure loop. And I think it's either the pleasure or the pain loop of what trauma does to people, right? It gets us stuck in a loop, and it's hard to break free from that, and I have this image of our society is on this loop, that where there's a bunch of people in the re-evolution loop. There, we call it hamster in the wheel, but it's people that would say, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable, life's pretty good. And that's like 65% of the population. But we have this whole other circle here, and it's a de-evolution. These are people who are dying, they're suffering, right? They have addiction, mental illness. It's like they're in de-evolution. And I believe that there is another group. And the group here is in the evolutionary. They've broken free from the re-evolution. And the change is happening with these people, the people that, here we are sitting right here in this room, because it's not going to happen in the people who are in re-evolution. And a lot of the times, this is the tough part, is that people in the re-evolutionary circle are people that are trying to be part of the solution, right? But they're working within a broken system. We have to come up with new ways of healing and serving, because it's not going to come in old systems, that we need to blow those up and create new ways of connection, new and more powerful ways.
A broken system, Bilal.
Yeah. That's part of the reason why Warrior Gamer exists. We know mental health is extremely impacted. The demand for mental health professionals is far exceeds the supply. And we try to solve it the way we can, but there are limitations. I mean, let's just take a look clinically. We don't have enough clinicians. Okay, how are you going to get more? Well, clearly there's a lot of red tape to get more. And even if you did, we know that the prevalence of mental illness is rising. The way society and environment changes far outpaces any change that we're seeing in scientific development. So then there's this perpetual gap of clinicians, of understanding and ideas. It seems like we can never fix the solution with the ways that we have currently. So we talk about innovation. Warrior Gamer was created based off innovation. It's recognizing that new technologies, or rather established technologies that we know of, can be harnessed for good. Things like gaming and media and so forth. What do you think about innovative strategies that you've taken in life that have helped you further the work that you're doing?
I think that that's all I've done, because I think that a lot of people are in this broke through from the re-evolution, which is a family structure, which is the type of work you were doing in life, which it could be generational things, whatever that is. The people have the courage or have the no choice to get to break free from that. We are the innovators, because we knew that there had to be another way, right? That we have to come up with another way. And for me, the reason why I'm so driven and passionate about this is because I did it alone. I'm the alpha girl, that there was no one like me. I didn't fit in even to my own family of origin. It's like you come in and you're like, whoa, how come no one's like, I didn't like the Grateful Dead. I was born into a family of deadheads. It was just weird. I'm like, this music is depressing. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like my life has been one innovative alliteration after the other. And yet now I'm realizing this isn't enough, because I don't have the community. I feel like in many ways that my own experience mirrors many men's experience, that achievement happened in a silo. My growth happened in a silo. And I don't want to do it alone. And that's why I'm so passionate about hearing about what you all are doing and creating a deeper community, a community that's different, that looks different, but has this depth of understanding. And what I love, my master coach, Brendon Bouchard, calls assertive vulnerability. Assertive vulnerability. It's stating a healthy boundary of what's cool for us, being able to be clear enough in that space, and then creating the boundary around that. I think it's a really powerful image. It certainly works for me.
Mm-hmm.
So you dropped a big nugget there. Brendon Burchard is a coach of yours?
He is I call him my master coach. I'm certified under Brendon.
Wow.
So I'm going to share a powerful story about Brendon Burchard as being a warrior, because you wouldn't know this about Brendon. But when you are with him in a space, he's got a couple powerful men on each of his sides. So he has like one guy watching the door. It feels like a male tribe around him. And he's so good, you guys. He's so good. But when I met him and I'm like, shook his hand, I'm like, Brendon, I'm going to be the top of your class, dude. And he looks right at me and he goes, I believe you are. Quiet. And he looked right through me. And I was like, whoa. And it's that kind of presence that we can gift other people. Because do you know how many times since that day, I want to cry. How many times I tell people, I believe in you. How few people have ever heard those words. I hadn't heard those words. And to have someone speak into me like that, it's a powerful, powerful gift. He's a good guy. That motivation manifesto is probably my favorite. That one right there. It comes across like it's a little dry, but I believe it's fantastic. And certified through Brendan, I go through the high performance habits. That's the system of my coaching work as a high performance coach.
Okay.
So good stuff.
So I'm going to hit on this real quick too. So there is no one that can argue that you haven't clawed your way to where you're at right now. That you weren't born with some kind of like thing that was given to you to have this success, that you've experienced a significant amount of trauma, and somehow, some way, like you just said, you know what, this is not happening to me. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going up. So can you cage that kind of that mind frame of, we have people who are watching, who are way over here.
Yeah,
right?
no, I love it. I love it.
Go.
I'm going to speak into that. Like, there's two things. The first thing I want to share is when Will died. And first of all, what I want to say to you all about Will is Will was an elegant, deep, gritty, spiritual, kind, loving, beautiful, athletic, musical, fumbling, just he was an incredible human. He came out very unique. And he was in a Buddhist monastery. He's going to be a monk. He was 20 years old. And he went to a Thai monastery, and off he went. I dropped him off like it was preschool. I'm like, oh my God, I was brought up Catholic. I have a kid that's a priest. And so he, 185, big kid, was a gymnast, like, super chill, wasn't connected to that, like his body. I mean, he was jacked. That's the covers, but he was jacked, you guys. And he came back from the monastery 145 pounds because they ate once a day. It was just, I was like, ah. But when he came back, I said, Will, I said, bud, when you go out traveling, you got to let me know where you are, because I got my mommy GPS on. And he looked at me and he, smile on his face, and he goes, Mom, I'm always going to be okay. And I was like, I know, babe. I know that. So that's what I lean on, because I knew his faith was way bigger than mine. So I lean on that belief, right? And so a few days after he passed, I woke up and I was like, it's a dream. It's got to be a friggin' nightmare. And I just had the tears like coming down my face, just laying on my pillow. And I was like, God, you have a sense of humor. Because my mission statement in this life is to live powerfully with courage and enthusiasm. And if there's a way to do grief powerfully and with courage and enthusiasm, watch me. And I blew up people. People did not like the way, my own family did not like that I was public in my grief. I blew up the shame that was in my family of origin, because my mother never dealt with the loss of her son. And I said, over my son, my angelic son's body, will I do and not live a life of integrity, because it was bigger than me. You see, it wasn't my story. And it's just now, 7 years later, that I'm 2 feet on the floor now speaking this with much more conviction, because it took me a long time. I wrote about it, I talk about, but now I'm like keynoting it. And I'm telling the story of Will, like coming downstairs with his shirt buttoned like this. I'm like, babe, you going to school like that? And he's like, what, Mom? You know what I mean? He was just so exquisite. But I have to say, I still can't listen to classical music. I still can't listen to Chopin because he played so beautifully. You see? So it's those cracks. It's those cracks that become the opening of our mess. That's where the stories are birthed. This is what we speak. We must speak these stories because hopefully my stories will impact listeners. Because it's true. Because I'm introducing you to Will, right? Because he was so awesome. And yeah, that's just an important piece. And the other piece, when you were bringing up how I was able to persevere, and like I said, classic ADHD, never fit in. Always felt like I was a boy because I was always getting yelled at. It was like, Mark, John, Katie, stop talking, sit down. I'm like, wait, what? I just want to talk to people, right? So I never fit in. So it's that I will persevere. I will persevere. And I think art is a big part of it. I found theater. It's the only thing I ever got A's in. So, and I believe life is theater. And when you think about it, right, and it's even how I built a 7-figure company, because if the gift is of theater, being 100% present and responding authentically to what you hear, I'm real good at that. That I do know I'm good at. I remember everything that people tell me. I remember, Bilas, your face when you described, like, who would have known that I would have liked OBGYN, right? I hear everything. I never forget people's heart and their stories. And that's a superpower. And I wanted to say to anyone listening, my last bit, anyone that you lost, that you loved, they were people that were important to you because we've all had that loss. It sucks. I want you to think about that person in your heart. Breathe them in and think out loud or on paper 3 qualities of that person that you friggin' loved. 3 qualities. Doesn't matter what they are. Speak them. And guess what? When that person left this world, they don't need those gifts anymore. We have the ability to pick those gifts up and wear them and become them. I wear Will's kindness, his gentleness, and his warmth like a shroud. I was not always so chill. I wasn't, but I wear him. Lucky me, right? Lucky me.
Well, I know Ken's mic is muted, but I just there's a lot to unpack with that story. It's super powerful. It's super moving, and it reminded me of something we were talking about earlier before we started recording. Was that in life there's so much to explore. Sometimes we find our walls, or sometimes the walls get put for us, and then we stop. But there is so much to live for, either things that haven't been explored or things that once were a part of your life. And then to do that, it requires a sense of curiosity. Now, I would like to ask you, because I don't think people are always by nature curious. I want to say they are, but to different extents. I would describe myself as somebody who's been innately curious for as long as I can remember. But I have met people who don't want to explore, who don't feel the need to explore. And if you somehow you could just like put it in them, that curious drive, that they will find something that they will grasp onto, and they will become so much greater than themselves and just feel so in tune with life and the energy around them. How does one instill that curiosity?
Oh, it's so delicious. Well, I would say it's all tied into this question. What did you hear that you were 2 of as a kid? What did you hear? Were you too curious as a kid? What did you get in trouble for?
Oh, there's a couple of things. Too curious was one of them. Too restless was the other.
Restless.
I'm way too restless. I'd sit in a class 5 minutes, my attention goes out the window. I would get in trouble for it. pretty regularly. I had to learn to control it quite a bit, but I've instead channeled that in something else. Ah, I see. I get it. I get it
And
now.
what about you? What did you hear that you were two of?
I think I was probably a little too talkative and a little too adventurous.
So isn't this nuts that you were too adventurous and too talkative, and you were too restless, which I think it was just your suppressed curiosity, right? So what is it that you are holding back that was innately your friggin' superpower? Like, I was too enthusiastic. Well, enthusiastic means in the divine. So too bad for everyone else, right? I mean, but you think about it, right? It's those qualities that we heard that we had to suppress, that we left the building with them still in the building. Who are we? Who were we before we were told we were to this or to that? I can speak to a room of 500 people and ask people to start raising their hand. And you're hearing people saying, I was too this, I was too smart, too athletic, to whatever that is. That's your essence. That's the part you need to fall in love with and bring that to the world. And it may not be curious. Maybe it's you're too studious or you're too, who knows, but ignite that who you are. Break free from the restriction of your first grade teacher telling you or you were this, or your dad telling you or you were this. Because oftentimes, guess what? It's not even your darn voice telling you you're two. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Kate, I have a question for people. A lot of the audience are parents. So should they sort of make an inventory of how often they say, you're just two to their children or grandchildren? You know, how can they make that a superpower with the even bosses who supervise, you know, just.
Well, it's a really good point, because if it's they're two for something, right? You're triggered by them because you feel oftentimes as parents, we don't want them to either be in trouble because of that. Because usually parents will respond that way to protect themselves, even the parent, from embarrassment, or from the child from being outcasted because they're different, right? It's oftentimes fundamental to parents wanting their children to be safe. You see? And it's not a necessarily like parents are bad. They just want to make sure that their kids don't stand out, because then that makes them feel, it's ego in a lot of ways, right? But it's also self-protection. And sometimes it's just unconscious that they don't want their kid, they're too free. They're too this, and it makes them uncomfortable because they don't like the reflection back. But I use the Strength Finder on my kids when they were young. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that tool, but I made Josh do it, and Josh's were friggin' off the chain. That was so incredible when we did it. But they have a younger person version, but it had these 34 different strengths. It's put out by Gallup. It's a business management tool, but I love it that a lot of the high schools and the colleges and MBA programs are using it. And what it does is it highlights the 5 key strengths, the operative strengths. And so the best thing you can do is to speak into your child. I don't have empathy in my top 10. I think it's like 18. It's like not even that far. But my son had empathy number 2. So he felt everything, and it was super reactive. And to me, he was over responsive, right? So I'd be like, babe, you're so keyed into what's going on around you. It's your superpower, right? So I would talk into him when I saw the negative reaction, because the negative was really him not being able to express who he really was, right? So if I helped him give words to it and say, I really need you to model for me what that looks like, because I don't have that one, you know? So if we can find ways to language, because the gift is in languaging. That's what we're here right now. We have the gift of language and helping our children language their emotional, intellectual experience, even spiritual experience. And I think that that's a really important aspect that is missing in our culture, because younger generations just get consciousness. My son understood consciousness. He understood what it meant, other realms. He understood it. But I will say, if you have someone that's meditating 8 or 10 hours a day, it's a warning sign. I didn't realize spiritual bypass was a thing. You see?
Yeah. So, Kate, give us some advice on, our kids are subjected to a lot of adult themed things nowadays. I mean, I see 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds watching superhero shows where people getting killed and smashed, and hey, that's your thing, right? But these can affect us in us saying you're too loud or you're too crazy or whatever. So how do we see through the programming of society into the spirit of someone that we're dealing with, whether it be kids or just a coworker or a spouse, to find that superpower?
Yeah, that's a really, so in the individual, give me more information of an example of what that is. Is that speaking to what we see in others and relate to others?
Yeah, so I see a bunch of different ways. So first, kids are the easiest example to understand. I'm telling my kid to stop, or you're too whatever. It could be programming from, the news or cartoons or whatever, or coworkers or bosses or spouses, where I'm like, you're too talkative, or you're too whatever it is. How do we know that, okay, maybe that's not a superpower, that's just, society messing around with someone's personality,
Right, or us getting
versus
triggered by a certain
Yeah.
personality type.
How do we find the superpower within the noise?
Of communication, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. I wrote an article for Entrepreneur Magazine. It was called like The Art of Negotiation or something like that. And it was basically like understanding that what we're fighting or arguing about or disagreeing on isn't usually the thing. It's the way we both approach the thing. So how do we in relationship say, hey, listen, we're both on the same side of this facing out. We're not necessarily this way, but we both ultimately want the same thing. So I believe that it's our responsibility as good communicators to say, what I want this relationship to look like is to have be really peaceful, or really describe, is that something you want? How do you want it to be? And then you both talk about the way. So how do we create the vision? Because we have to become visionaries for our communication. It's a pretty big responsibility, to be honest. Oh yeah, I think that's, yeah, or maybe it's not that one, but I think there's another one on there too.
Okay,
but anyway, it's coming up with that vision forward, and we have to take the role of de-escalating. And who does a really great job talking about this is Brendan Bouchard, because he was like a mediator in like college. So everyone becoming hammered and everything else, and he was able to bring the chill vibe. But you know why? He grew up in a lot of violence, and he knew we didn't want violence. So he learned how to handle and de-escalate really high, tense situations. His childhood was extraordinarily violent. I think his father was in Nam and was violent. But he loved his parents, but there was a lot of violence and poverty in his home. And so how do we de-escalate? Well, we de-escalate by agreeing that we want a vision. And I did this, interestingly enough, with my kids, because they still want to play out in relationships when they were young. And I'm like, so guys, now that you're an adult, like we're now two adults. I mean, I'm still your mom, and you're still my son or my daughter. But I would love it if we could reframe out this relationship. How do you want this relationship to be? And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people don't want to take ownership for that because they'll balk at it, right? They'll be like, no, I don't want to take responsibility for letting go of my triggers to try to trigger you, mom. But we have to take the role and de-escalate by saying, this is the way that I want this relationship to look like. How would that look? You can do that with your children when they're young. I really want to have a peaceful time in the house. What does that look like? You're going to be shocked and amazed what even the littles are going to come up with.
This is really good advice. Bilal, I think you agree. Like this is, we've never heard this on the show.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. These are great tools. Okay, our community, be very, very thankful for these, especially from someone who's implemented them.
Oh gosh.
To go to where you're at, right? Can you just like, you're the real deal. I mean, you are, it's incredible. I had your Amazon page up. You have 12 books just listed on Amazon. They're beautiful. They're amazing. They're incredible. You just let the folks know who have tuned in what your accomplishments have been and how much they actually really do mean to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They mean nothing to me because I'm an achiever in the Strength Finder. So I've competed in bikini competitions for 17 years since I was 43, post my kids. And why? Because if I didn't lift weights, I'd probably be a drug addict, like 7 of my siblings. Okay. So I have had to put bumpers, like when kids play bowling, I have bumpers in my life because I go off rail real easily. So I've had to put constriction around my life in order to be successful. Blinders, right? Because if I don't, I'm not quite sure what would happen. So for 17 years, people say, Kate, you're so disciplined. And I want to burst out laughing. This is the funniest thing. Me talking about that Strength Finder earlier. Guess what my last strength is out of the 34? Discipline. I hate that word. I'm actually learning to love it. But I have focus. I have hyper focus capacities, right? So I would say that I'm only as good as what I do today in service. And my highlight today has been this call. My other highlight today was I live in a building with a lot of very wealthy people. And I bake cookies for the janitors and the maintenance guys because they're my people. They're my people. So I'm picking up my Wall Street out of my mailbox, and Hector comes up to me and he goes, Katie, because I just want to let you know I'm leaving. And I go, my eyes start like, I'm like blinking back my tears. I've only lived here for 6 months, but I bonded with these men. And I was like, you're leaving? I hate goodbyes, And then he's like hugs me and he like holding me and he's hugging me. And I was just like, this is what my success is, that people know I freaking care. I can't imagine. He's not saying that to all the droves of other people that have never stopped and looked this man in the eye. That's success. That's what my son Will would have done. I remember when I was dropping Will off at the monastery, he was like 20. And we're on a plane, it's like crowded. And then I see he gets set next to some kind of, chunky, overweight woman, like in her 50s or whatever. And I'm like, oh boy, 20 years old. He's going to have his earbuds on, The whole time, every time I went back to the bathroom, my son Will was like this close to her and nodding her and laughing and nodding and listening to her. And she was exalted, completely lit up that this young, beautiful man found her enthralling. That's my example, right? And so I say anything, any book, any company I built, any of it doesn't mean anything. My experience today is about this moment and my hug with Hector. That's my day, man. That's it. That's as good as it gets for me. Truth up.
I love it. It's a very powerful statement where people put all their accomplishments right on the wall and they look at them, but the real accomplishment are the stories behind it and the people that you touch. And it's really important. I see a lot of people who are very upset and who have post-traumatic stress. They tell a story a lot about themselves and they go through this routine telling the story and and they're trying to get that care on them when in fact you're telling us, look, the best way to feel fulfilled and to actually get all the success is to care about the other person or other people, right?
To serve. I remember I was leaving a show at the Bronx, a competition. I came in first, I think, or something, or whatever. I don't know. But I usually like leave my trophies or whatever. But I remember like the janitor was there and he was like, oh, and he was so excited because, we're all done up, looking flashy and all hot and everything in these crazy bathing suits and high heels and all the crazy thing. It's costume. It's a pageant, right? And I was like, dude, and I was a big trophy and I like hand it to him and I'm like, here, you can have it. And he goes, I can have it? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm in the Bronx. So I'm driving away and I look out of my rear view and he's waving goodbye, holding the trophy in front of like the venue. It was the best. And he texted me later. He's like, I hope you got home okay. Found me on social, whatever. I was like, oh, it was the best. But like that cracks me up because I'll never forget the image of the rear view of the guy holding my. So it's like stories like that just make me happy, It's like, oh, so I told you a story about I met this famous person or like whatever. It's like, who cares? Were they nice? And the only reason why I shared my story of Brendan Bouchard is because he looked into me and he's a role model to me of goodness. So, and there's that.
I mean,
Wow.
your stories are the living embodiment of the age-old quote, the real journey is the friends we made along the way.
And it's
As
just,
much of a meme as it is, that is so, so important. And I'm just really happy to be in the presence of somebody who lives and breathes it every single day.
and it's fleeting.
It's awesome.
It's so fleeting. And it could be the depth of our connection isn't in the length. The depth of the connection is in the depth of the connection. And it could be one moment.
Yeah.
Because one moment, it's like, how many long-term friendships do I have? How many? I don't measure like marriages. Oh, they were married 60 years, but were they happy? Did they live their best life? Stop measuring length as the measure of impact. No.
Great advice. I don't know what's left that we could possibly this is incredible. So Bilal, do you want to before we wrap it up a bit, she's a busy lady in demand and we are so grateful for your time and you're incredible and I'm going to watch this lots of times. I'm going to play it while I'm doing all kinds of working out and everything. So I suggest other people do too. So Bilal, what's some of your final thoughts and questions here?
Final thoughts, I'd say we should always, as a people, we should focus on quality over quantity. And I believe that, although change is difficult, that change is daunting, and there is a lot to do to make the world more fun and fulfilling for ourselves and everybody else. I think that everybody inherently has the power to do so. Every single person has the power to do so. We just need that little spark. I can hope that whoever's listening, that they feel that spark the same way I did.
Or the flame torch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because the thing is that the magic comes in all different shapes. And I know I'm not for everybody. Like that's why I prefer working with men, because men can kind of deal with me. Like women, I sort of offend for some reason. I don't know why, but in general, like I'm too much for most women. That's why I'm like, guys are easier because men talk about ideas. Like, I don't want to talk about, what's the point of the story? I'm more like a guy, like, tell me like the real meat of the story. Right. And I just want to say, I honor this community. I'm so deeply, deeply grateful. And remember, the most important thing I want to say is that you are not alone. You are not alone. Pick up the phone and call someone, text someone, hey, I'm not doing good. And someone will be there for you. Keep reaching out to people. The number one self-care thing that men need is community. It's not getting a mani-pedi. Your help, your connection, your lifeline is in community. Doesn't matter if you're sitting there watching the ball game. That's community, and that's perfectly okay. Perfectly, perfectly, wonderfully okay.
Okay, so what video games have you played along your life so far? We're very interested in the gaming you've done. That's cool.
All right.
And that's her.
Eating things.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate chick thing, right? Yeah. It's like I haven't really been the video girl. And I think it's probably because I probably knew that it was going to be more of an addictive thing for me. And so I've used story and weight training as my drug of choice, because I really do believe that there would have been more of an addictive issue for me. But plus I have a focus issue. So gaming, I know, helps people focus, but I use reading as that same track.
I love your quote on like guardrails, right? So this is something that I have fully bought into, and I would not be here where I'm at and have the accomplishments and everything if I didn't fully believe, like, I am lazy. Like, I know I'm lazy.
Me
And
too.
I have to, yes. And there's a book, Michael Brody Waite, called Great Leaders Live Like Drug Addicts. And it's very interesting because he was a drug addict and now he's super crazy successful. And he's like, look, like, I know that I can be addictive. I have to build guardrails in, and I have to, like, make sure I'm doing this so that I don't go over here. And I'm like, if I need to work out, I need to make sure that I am, like, either the gym's downstairs or like across the street. Otherwise I'm not going. Right.
Yeah,
So
it has to. I know I'll just hate myself if I don't go. Like, I just did like leg extensions and leg curls and a couple bicep curls before I started here. I'm like, I got to do something. I got to do something. The one thing I love that the great leaders live like drug addicts. I'm absolutely going to get that. But the thing is that just in my new book that I'm going to be releasing soon called The Agility Mindset, the first pillar is balance is bullshit. That there's no such thing. That we all need to be obsessed in something, right? And it's a yummy obsession. And people in our society look at people who are passionate negatively, like, you work too much. I love what I do. I love to learn and make connection with people there, and I love it. Do I work too much? No, that's not my problem. That's a judgment of other people. Number two, on this one, I really want to stress, and I hold this for all of us, that we all have the psychological fortitude to persevere as warriors, because the basis of being able to be resilient is the fortitude which we carry in our hearts. So go forth, warriors. Let's all let's grow and lead and be the mess of who we are together, because the mess is just exquisitely beautiful.
I think that's fantastic. So that's a great ending there. I love it. So people want to know more about you and where to find you. I did pull up the Amazon a little bit ago, but can you speak out, just folks who might be on Spotify, where they can find your socials and buy all of your stuff?
Yeah. So Master Your Life with Kate McKay is my podcast. As I mentioned, my new book, The Agility Mindset, is coming out. I think you guys are going to freaking love that one. I am very pumped about it. It is, I've been reading the 33 Strategies of War. If any of you have not read Robert Greene, you must. He is brilliant historian and psychologist. His study of human nature, 48 Laws of Power is incredible. But I have to tell you, 33 Strategies of War was my favorite. And the one story briefly about Patton. I went to school with his granddaughter, high school, performing arts. But Patton was scared to death. He had this historic legacy behind him, right, of great warriors in his family. And he's on the front line, and he's like petrified. He's filled with fear, and he's getting ready to take that step back. And he sees out in the mist. He's in the front line. He sees in the mist all his ancestors in front of him in the mist. And they say to him, charge, move forward. And so he stepped into courage. And Patton, why did he fight? Why did he bring himself to the front line a lot as a general? It was crazy, because he always wanted to look into the mist to meet his fear. We all can meet our fear, because courage is being able to go to that line and look in the mist and see and picture who you are here to serve. Today, it was you guys and Hector. My mist, right? Know who's in your mist. Look for the people in your mist. That's all I got to say.
Love it. All right. The Warrior Gamer Headquarters podcast. Out.
Warrior Gamer Headquarters podcast. Out.